The alarm bells rang through the military base like thunder on a quiet morning. Sergeant Jake Rodriguez jumped from his bunk, his boots hitting the cold metal floor with a thud. After 12 years in the Space Marines, he knew that sound meant only one thing: emergency evacuation. All units to stations, solar storm approaching in 6 hours. The commander's voice echoed through the hallways. Jake grabbed his gear and ran toward the transport bay where his team was already waiting. The mining colony on planet Kepler was home to nearly 10,000 people. Humans had been living there for almost 20 years, digging precious metals from the rocky ground. But today, a massive solar storm was heading straight for them, the kind that could burn everything on the surface to nothing. Jake looked at his team, 5 good soldiers who had been through tough times with him. They all knew what they had to do: get every human off the planet before the storm hit. No exceptions, no delays. Listen up, Jake called to his squad. We have 6 transports coming in. Each one can carry 800 people. That means we need to move fast and stay organized. Check every building, every shelter, every corner. Make sure no one gets left behind. The evacuation started smoothly. Families rushed toward the landing, pads with their most important belongings. Children cried while parents tried to stay calm. The transport ships landed one by one, their engines creating small dust storms as they touched down. Jake helped an elderly man climb into the first transport. The old guy was shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. "Don't worry," Jake told him with a smile. "You'll be safe soon. These ships are built to handle anything." But as they worked, Jake noticed something strange. The Zephyrian aliens who also lived on this planet were nowhere to be seen. For 3 years, humans and Zephyrians had been fighting over mining rights. The war had created deep hatred between both species. Most humans saw the Zephyrians as enemies who wanted to steal their resources. "Sergeant Rodriguez," called Private Wilson, one of his team members. "Should we check the Zephyrian settlement too? The storm will hit them just as hard." Jake paused for a moment. His orders were clear: evacuate humans only. The Zephyrians had their own ships and their own evacuation plans. That's what the commanders had told them anyway. "Stick to the plan, Wilson. We focus on our people first," Jake replied, though something didn't feel right about it. As the third transport filled up and took off, Jake decided to do one final sweep of the area. The storm was getting closer, and the sky was already turning, an angry red color. He walked through the empty streets of what used to be a busy town. That's when he heard it. A soft whimpering sound coming from behind a collapsed building. Jake moved closer, his weapon ready just in case. What he found made his heart skip a beat. A small Zephyrian child was trapped under some fallen metal beams. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her skin had the typical blue-gray color of her species, and her large eyes were filled with tears. She was hurt, with cuts on her arms and legs, and she was calling out in her own language. Jake stood there for a moment, frozen. Everything he had been taught said this child was supposed to be his enemy. Zephyrians were the reason his best friend had died in battle 2 years ago. They were the ones who attacked human settlements and killed innocent people. But looking at this scared little girl, all Jake could see was a child who needed help. He looked around quickly. His team was busy loading the last transport. The storm would hit in less than 2 hours. If he helped this child, he would be breaking direct orders. If his commanders found out, he could face serious punishment. The child looked at him with pleading eyes. She tried to speak, but Jake couldn't understand her words. However, he didn't need to understand language to know what she was asking for: help. Jake made his decision. He put down his weapon and started moving the metal beams. They were heavy, and his back ached as he lifted them one by one. The child watched him with surprise. She probably expected him to leave her there or worse. "It's okay," Jake said softly as he worked. "I'm going to get you out of here." When he finally freed her, the child tried to stand but fell down immediately. Her leg was badly hurt. Without thinking, Jake picked her up in his arms. She was so light, like holding a feather. The child looked at him with confusion and fear, but she didn't try to fight. Maybe she understood that he was trying to help her. Jake covered her with his emergency blanket, the one every soldier carried for extreme situations. Now came the hard part. Jake had to get to the transport without his team seeing the child. He knew they would try to stop him. Some of them had lost family members in the war and wouldn't understand why he was helping a Zephyrian. Jake waited until his team was busy with the final boarding procedures. Then he quietly slipped aboard the transport, keeping the child hidden under his jacket. His heart was beating so fast he thought everyone could hear it. "That's everyone, Sergeant," called Wilson as he climbed aboard. "Ready for departure." The transport doors closed with a loud hiss. Jake found a seat in the back corner and carefully arranged the blanket so the child was completely hidden. She had stopped crying and was now just looking at him with those big, curious eyes. As the ship lifted off from the planet's surface, Jake felt a mix of relief and worry. He had saved a life, but he had also disobeyed direct orders. What would happen when they reached the space station? How would he explain carrying an enemy child? During the 3-day journey to the nearest space station, Jake took care of the little girl as best he could. He shared his food rations with her and cleaned her wounds with his medical kit. She was still scared, but slowly, she began to trust him. Jake tried to communicate with her using simple gestures and drawings. He pointed to himself and said Jake several times until she seemed to understand. She pointed to herself and made a sound that he thought might be her name. On the second day, Jake's team member, Private Chen, noticed something was different. "Sergeant, you've been acting strange since we left the planet. Is everything okay?" Jake's stomach dropped. Had Chen seen the child? "Just tired, Private." It was a long evacuation. But Chen kept watching him suspiciously. Jake knew he couldn't hide the child much longer. Soon they would reach the space station, and everyone would have to go through processing. That's when his secret would be discovered. On the final day of the journey, Jake made another difficult decision. He would tell his team the truth and face whatever consequences came with it. He gathered his squad in the transport's back section. "I need to tell you all something," Jake began, his voice shaking slightly. "I found someone during the evacuation, someone who needed help." He slowly pulled back the blanket, revealing the small Zephyrian child. His team members gasped and reached for their weapons instinctively. "Sergeant, what have you done?" Wilson asked in shock. "That's an enemy alien. Why did you bring her aboard?" Jake looked at each of his team members. These were people he had served with for years. They had saved each other's lives multiple times. He hoped they would understand. "Look at her," Jake said calmly. "Really look at her. She's just a child. She was hurt and alone, and the storm would have killed her. I couldn't leave her there to die." The child seemed to sense the tension in the room. She moved closer to Jake and grabbed his arm, clearly frightened by the other soldiers. "This could get us all in trouble," said Private Martinez. "The commanders will think we're traitors or spies." "Then that's a risk I'm willing to take," Jake replied firmly. "I didn't become a soldier to let children die, no matter what species they are." The transport ship continued toward the space station while Jake's team debated what to do. Some wanted to report the situation immediately. Others thought they should support their sergeant who had always looked out for them. In the end, it was the child herself who changed their minds. She had been listening to their conversation, and even though she couldn't understand the words, she could feel their anger and fear. Tears started rolling down her cheeks and she began to shake. Without thinking, Private Wilson, the same soldier who had questioned Jake's decision, knelt down beside the child. He pulled out a small chocolate bar from his personal supplies and offered it to her with a gentle smile. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "Don't be scared. We're going to take care of you." The child looked at the chocolate, then at Wilson, then back at Jake. Slowly, she reached out and took the treat. For the first time since Jake had found her, she smiled. That moment changed everything. Jake's entire squad realized that this wasn't about politics or war or following orders. This was about basic human decency and protecting someone who couldn't protect herself. When their transport finally docked at Space Station Harmony 7, Jake walked off the ship carrying the child openly. He didn't try to hide her anymore. His team walked beside him, showing their support. The station's processing officers were shocked to see a Zephyrian child with human soldiers. Within minutes, Jake was called to meet with his commanding officer, Colonel Thompson. "Sergeant Rodriguez," the colonel said sternly as Jake stood at attention. "I understand you brought an unauthorized passenger aboard your transport. Care to explain?" Jake told his story from beginning to end. He didn't try to make excuses or minimize what he had done. He simply explained that he found a hurt child and couldn't leave. Commander Zara Velnoth stared at the empty bed in her daughter's room. The small blue blanket was still folded neatly at the foot of the bed, just like Kira had left it 3 months ago. Every morning, Zara hoped she would wake up from this nightmare and find her little girl playing with her favorite toys. But this wasn't a dream. This was real life. And her 8-year-old daughter was missing somewhere in human territory. Zara walked to her kitchen and made herself a cup of thermal tea, though she had no appetite for it. The liquid was bitter, matching her mood perfectly. She had been the top military strategist for the Zephyrian forces, leading successful operations against human settlements for 3 years. But all of that success meant nothing when she couldn't protect her own child. The communication device on her table buzzed with an incoming message. Zara's heart jumped. Maybe it was news about Kira. But when she opened it, she found another mission briefing from her superior officers. "Commander Velnoth, you are needed for the assault on the Titan mining station. Report for duty immediately." Zara stared at the message with frustration. How could they expect her to focus on military operations when her daughter was lost? She had been requesting permission to search for Kira for weeks, but her commanders kept denying her requests. The war effort comes first, they always told her. Personal matters must wait. But Zara couldn't wait anymore. Every day that passed meant Kira could be getting further away or worse. She had to do something, even if it meant going against direct orders. That evening, Zara met with her old friend Commander Dex at a quiet restaurant in the city center. Dex had served with her for 10 years and was one of the few people she trusted completely. "You look terrible, Zara," Dex said as he sat down across from her. "When was the last time you slept properly?" "Sleep doesn't matter when my daughter is out there somewhere," Zara replied, stirring her food without eating it. "Dex, I need your help with something important." Dex leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What kind of help?" Zara looked around to make sure no one was listening. "I need access to the human communication networks, the ones we've been monitoring during the war." "Zara, that's highly classified information. If anyone finds out I gave you access, we could both face serious consequences." "My daughter is more important than any consequences," Zara said firmly. "She was on planet Kepler when the solar storm hit. I've been getting reports that some survivors made it to human rescue ships." Dex was quiet for a moment, understanding the weight of what Zara was asking. He had children too, and he knew he would do anything to find them if they were lost. "Okay," he finally said. "But you have to be careful. If the High Command discovers what we're doing, they'll consider it treason." The next day, Dex provided Zara with access codes to the human communication systems they had been secretly monitoring. Zara spent hours going through evacuation reports, refugee lists, and transport manifests. Most of the information was coded or written in human language, which Zara had learned during her military training. She searched through thousands of names and reports looking for any mention of a young Zephyrian child. After 2 days of searching, Zara found something that made her heart race. A report from Space Station Harmony 7 mentioned one unauthorized refugee of Zephyrian origin, approximately 8 years of age, currently in protective custody. The report didn't mention Kira's name, but Zara knew in her heart that this had to be her daughter. How many 8-year-old Zephyrian children could there be in human custody? The report was filed by someone called Sergeant J. Rodriguez, and mentioned that the child had been rescued during evacuation operations on planet Kepler. Zara read the report multiple times, trying to understand what had happened. A human soldier had rescued her daughter? This seemed impossible. Humans were supposed to be heartless enemies who cared only about themselves. Why would one of their soldiers save a Zephyrian child? Over the following weeks, Zara continued to search for more information about this Sergeant Rodriguez and her daughter's current situation. She learned that Kira was being held at a refugee processing center on the space station, but getting more detailed information was proving difficult. Zara also discovered something that surprised her. The human soldier who had rescued Kira was now working in refugee services, helping displaced people from both species. This didn't match the image of humans that Zephyrian military propaganda had painted. "I've been thinking about what you told me," Dex said during one of their secret meetings, "about the human who rescued Kira. Maybe not all humans are as bad as we've been told." Zara had been thinking the same thing, but it was hard to accept. She had spent 3 years fighting against humans, believing they were cruel and selfish. Learning that one of them had risked his career to save her daughter was confusing and challenging everything she thought she knew. Meanwhile, Zara's work performance was suffering. She missed important meetings and made strategic errors during planning sessions. Her superior officers noticed her distraction and called her into their headquarters. "Commander Velnoth," said General Corks, the highest-ranking officer in their sector, "your recent performance has been unacceptable. You seem distracted and unfocused. What's going on?" Zara stood at attention, trying to appear professional. "I apologize, General. I've been dealing with some personal issues." "Personal issues have no place in military operations," the general replied sternly. "We're in the middle of a war, Commander. Our people are counting on your strategic expertise." "I understand, sir. I hope you do. Because if your performance doesn't improve immediately, you'll be removed from command and assigned to basic duties." After leaving the meeting, Zara felt more frustrated than ever. Her military career was falling apart, but she couldn't focus on anything except finding Kira. She had to make a choice between her duty as a soldier and her love as a mother. That night, Zara made her decision. She would request emergency leave to handle her personal situation. If they denied her request, she would take unauthorized leave and face the consequences later. To her surprise, her request was approved. General Corks seemed to think that a short break would help her refocus on her military duties. He had no idea that Zara was planning to travel into enemy territory to find her daughter. Zara spent the next few days preparing for her mission. She studied maps of Space Station Harmony 7 and learned about human security procedures. She also practiced speaking English, though her accent was still quite strong. The hardest part was getting forged diplomatic papers. Zara contacted an underground network that helped families find missing relatives during the war. These people operated in secret and took great risks to reunite separated families. "What you're planning is extremely dangerous," warned Kelvin, the man who provided her fake documents. "If the humans discover you're a military commander, they'll arrest you as a spy or worse." "I have to try," Zara replied. "She's my daughter. I can't just leave her there." "I understand, but you need to be smart about this. Act like a worried mother, not a soldier. Humans respond better to emotional appeals than military demands." Zara practiced her cover story dozens of times. She would claim to be a civilian diplomat working on prisoner exchange negotiations. This would give her a legitimate reason to be on the human space station and access to refugee areas. The journey to human territory took 5 days on a civilian transport ship. Zara felt nervous the entire time, wondering if her fake papers would pass inspection. She also worried about what she would find when she reached the station. Was Kira okay? Had the humans been treating her well? Would her daughter even remember her after being away for so long? As the transport ship approached Space Station Harmony 7, Zara looked out the window at the massive structure. It was much larger than she had expected, with docking bays for hundreds of ships and living quarters for thousands of people. Somewhere in that huge station was her little girl, and Zara was determined to find her no matter what it took. The docking procedure went smoothly, and Zara's fake diplomatic papers passed the initial security screening. She was assigned temporary quarters in the diplomatic section of the station and given a schedule of meetings with human officials. But Zara wasn't interested in diplomatic meetings. As soon as she was alone in her room, she began planning how to locate the refugee processing center where Kira was being held. According to her research, the center was in section C7 of the station, about 20 minutes away by transport tube. The area was restricted to authorized personnel only, which meant Zara would need to find a way to get inside without arousing suspicion. That evening, Zara put on civilian clothes and made her way toward the refugee section. Her heart was pounding, with excitement and fear. After months of searching and planning, she was finally close to finding her daughter. The refugee area was heavily guarded, but Zara had studied the security patterns and knew when the guards would be changing shifts. She waited in a maintenance corridor until the right moment, then slipped past the checkpoint while the guards were distracted. The refugee center was larger than she had expected, with dormitories, medical facilities, and recreational areas. Hundreds of people were living there, humans and aliens who had been displaced by the war. Zara searched through several dormitories, looking for any sign of Kira. Zara's hands trembled as she watched her daughter laugh with the human soldier. 3 months of searching, sleepless nights, and dangerous missions had led to this moment. Kira was alive, healthy, and happy, but she was also clearly attached to her rescuer. Taking a deep breath, Zara stepped into the room. "Kira?" she called softly in their native language. The little girl looked up from her card game and froze. For a moment, she stared at Zara with wide eyes, as if trying to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Then recognition dawned on her face. "Mama!" Kira screamed, jumping from her chair and running across the room. Zara dropped to her knees and caught her daughter in a tight embrace. Tears streamed down her face as she held the child she thought she might never see again. Kira felt smaller than she remembered, but she was warm and real and safe in her arms. "My baby, my sweet little one," Zara whispered, stroking Kira's hair. "I've been looking for you everywhere. I was so scared I'd lost you forever." Kira pulled, back to look at her mother's face. "I knew you would find me, Mama. I told Jake you would come for me." Jake. That must be the human soldier. Zara looked up and saw him standing awkwardly by the table, clearly unsure what to do. He was younger than she had expected, maybe in his early 30s, with gentle eyes that didn't match the image of cruel human soldiers she had in her mind. "You must be Sergeant Rodriguez," Zara said in careful English, still holding Kira close. Jake nodded, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon before he stopped himself. "And you're Kira's mother. I didn't expect to meet you like this." The tension in the room was thick. Here were two people who had been trained to see each other as enemies, brought together by a child they both loved. Zara could see the conflict in Jake's eyes. He was happy that Kira had found her mother, but also worried about losing the little girl who had become so important to him. "How did you get in here?" Jake asked, his military training taking over. "This area is restricted. Security should have stopped you." "I have my ways," Zara replied, not wanting to reveal her military background just yet. "I've been searching for my daughter for months. When I heard she was here, nothing could have stopped me from finding her." Kira looked between her mother and Jake, sensing the tension. "It's okay, Jake. This is my mama. She's good just like you." The simple words from an 8-year-old girl somehow broke through the awkwardness. Jake's shoulders relaxed slightly, and he offered Zara a cautious smile. "Kira talks about you all the time," he said. "She never stopped believing you would find her. She's an amazing kid." "Thank you," Zara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for taking care of her, for saving her life." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do. She needed help." "No," Zara said firmly. "Not anyone would do what you did. You risked your career, maybe your life, to save a child from an enemy species. That takes a special kind of courage." They stood there for a moment, two parents bound together by their love for the same child. Zara had come here expecting to face a typical human soldier, cold, calculating, maybe cruel. Instead, she found a man who had clearly been caring for Kira with genuine love and dedication. "Mama, look what Jake taught me," Kira said, breaking the silence. She ran to a small desk and pulled out a notebook filled with drawings. "He's been helping me learn English, and I've been teaching him our language." Zara looked through the notebook with amazement. There were pictures of spaceships, alien creatures, and happy families. But what struck her most were the drawings of Jake and Kira together, playing games, sharing meals, reading books. These weren't the drawings of a prisoner and her guard. These were the drawings of a child who felt safe and loved. "She's very talented," Jake said, moving closer to look at the drawings. "And she's a great teacher. My Zephyrian is getting better every day, though I still make a lot of mistakes." Kira giggled. "He said purple elephant instead of good morning yesterday. It was so funny." Even Zara couldn't help but smile at that. She had spent 3 years believing that humans were incapable of kindness or humor, especially towards Zephyrians. But here was proof that she had been wrong. "Mama, are we going home now?" Kira asked, tugging on Zara's sleeve. The question hit Zara like a physical blow. Of course Kira would want to come home with her. That's why she had come here, to rescue her daughter and bring her back to Zephyrian territory. But looking at Jake's face, she could see the pain her answer would cause. Yes, sweetheart. That's why I'm here," Zara said slowly. Jake tried to hide his emotions, but Zara could see the hurt in his eyes. He had been caring for Kira for months, and she had clearly become like a daughter to him. Losing her would be devastating. "When?" Kira asked. "Soon, baby. Very soon." But even as she said the words, Zara felt confused. She had expected this moment to be simple. Find Kira, take her home, and resume their normal life. She hadn't expected to find her daughter so happy and well cared for by a human who clearly loved her. "Jake, can you come home with us?" Kira asked innocently. Both adults froze. The idea was impossible, of course. Jake was a human soldier, and Zara was a Zephyrian military commander. They were supposed to be enemies, not potential family members. "Don't think that would work, kiddo," Jake said gently. "Your mama needs to take you back to your own people where you belong." "But you're my people too now," Kira protested. "You take care of me and play with me and help me when I have bad dreams. That's what family does." Zara felt her heart breaking. Her daughter had found a second father in this human soldier, and taking her away would hurt both of them deeply. But what choice did she have? "Kira, honey, we need to talk," Zara said. "Just you and me for a few minutes." Jake understood and started to leave the room, but Kira grabbed his hand. "No, don't go. I want you to stay." "It's okay," Jake said, kneeling down to Kira's level. "Your mom needs to talk to you alone. I'll just be outside in the hallway." After Jake left, Zara sat on the bed with her daughter. "Kira, I need to understand something. Are you happy here?" Kira nodded enthusiastically. "Jake is really nice, Mama. He reads me stories every night and helps me with my homework. He taught me how to play human games, and I taught him our songs." "Do you want to come home with me?" "Yes, but I want Jake to come too. Can't we all be a family together?" Zara sighed. How could she explain to an 8-year-old that the universe didn't work that way? That humans and Zephyrians were at war and that bringing Jake home would be impossible? "Sweetheart, Jake has his own life here, his own job and friends. He can't just leave everything to come with us. But he loves me and I love him. Isn't that enough?" If only it were that simple, Zara thought. If only love could overcome species differences and military conflicts and years of hatred between their people. "I know you love him, baby, and I can see that he loves you too. But sometimes loving someone means making hard choices." Kira's eyes filled with tears. "You mean I have to choose between you and Jake?" "No, honey, you don't have to choose. You're coming home with me because that's where you belong. But we can be grateful to Jake for taking care of you when I couldn't." Outside in the hallway, Jake paced back and forth. He could hear the conversation through the thin walls, and every word felt like a knife to his heart. He had known this day would come eventually, the day when someone would claim Kira and take her away from him. But knowing it would happen and experiencing it were two very different things. Over the past few months, Kira had become the most important person in his life. She had taught him that the enemy he had been fighting wasn't really an enemy at all, just people trying to survive and protect their families, just like humans. When Zara and Kira emerged from the room, both had been crying, Kira ran to Jake and hugged him tightly. "I don't want to say goodbye," she whispered. "I don't want to either," Jake admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "But your mama found you, and that's what we've been hoping for all along." Zara watched this exchange with growing internal conflict. She had come here to rescue her daughter from enemies, but instead she found herself watching a heartbreaking farewell between two people who genuinely loved each other. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said formally, "I want to thank you properly for what you've done. You saved my daughter's life and cared for her when I couldn't. I will never forget that." Jake looked at her with surprise. "You don't need to thank me. Taking care of Kira it's been an honor. Still, I owe you a debt I can never repay. Is there anything I can do for you? Anything at all?" Jake thought for a moment. "Just take good care of her. Love her the way she deserves to be loved. She's special, you know. She has this way of seeing the good in everyone, even people she's supposed to consider enemies." "I know," Zara said softly. "She gets that from her father." They stood there in awkward silence, three people brought together by impossible circumstances: a human soldier, a Zephyrian mother, and a little girl who loved them both. "When do we have to leave?" Kira asked quietly. Zara realized she hadn't actually planned this part. She had been so focused on finding Kira that she hadn't thought about the logistics of getting her home safely. I need to make arrangements," she admitted. "It might take a day or two." "Can I stay with Jake until then?" Kira asked hopefully. Zara looked at Jake, who nodded slightly. "If that's what you want, sweetheart." The next morning, Zara couldn't sleep. She had spent the night in the diplomatic quarters, but her mind kept racing with thoughts about Kira and Jake. Seeing them together had shaken everything she believed about humans and this war. She walked to the observation deck of the space station and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, her own people were preparing for another battle against human forces. Meanwhile, here she was, grateful to a human soldier who had shown more kindness to her daughter than some of her own military colleagues had shown to their own families. Couldn't sleep either? Zara turned around and saw Jake approaching. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. Obviously, he had been struggling with the same conflicted feelings. "Too much to think about," Zara replied in English, still working to hide her accent. Jake came to stand beside her at the large window. For a few minutes, they just watched the stars together in silence. Finally, Jake spoke up. "You know, before I met Kira, I thought all Zephyrians were heartless creatures who wanted to destroy everything humans had built. The propaganda we get makes you all sound like monsters." Zara nodded slowly. "We're told the same things about humans, that you're greedy and cruel, that you care only about taking resources from other planets. But Kira isn't like that at all. She's kind and funny and smart. She taught me that maybe everything I've been told is wrong." "And you're not like what I expected either," Zara admitted. "I thought humans were incapable of love or compassion, especially toward our kind. But you've proven me wrong." They stood there for another moment, both realizing they were having a conversation that could get them both in serious trouble with their respective military commanders. "Can I ask you something personal?" Jake said. "Go ahead. Where is Kira's father? Is he still alive?" Zara's expression grew sad. "He died 2 years ago in a battle against human forces. He was a good man, a peaceful person who only joined the military to protect our family. He would have loved to meet you." Jake felt a pang of guilt. He had probably fought in battles where Kira's father might have been present. The idea that he could have been responsible for making Kira an orphan made him feel sick. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This war has taken too much from all of us." "Yes, it has, and for what? So we can fight over mining rights on dead planets? So politicians can feel powerful? Meanwhile, children lose their parents and families get torn apart." Jake looked at Zara with surprise. This didn't sound like something an enemy soldier would say. This sounded like someone who was questioning the war just as much as he was. "You don't sound like a typical refugee," he observed carefully. Zara realized she had said too much. Her military training was slipping as her emotions took over. What do you mean? Most civilians I've met don't talk about military strategy or political motivations, they just want to get home safely. Zara felt panic rising in her chest. If Jake discovered she was a military commander, everything would change. He might arrest her or report her to station security. I've lost a lot because of this war, she said, trying to deflect. It makes you think about things differently. Jake studied her face for a moment, and Zara could see him putting pieces together. He was smarter than she had given him credit. You're not just a concerned mother looking for her daughter, are you? He asked slowly. Zara's hand moved instinctively toward where her weapon would normally be, but she wasn't armed. They stood there looking at each other, both realizing that this conversation had taken a dangerous turn. Who are you really? Jake asked. Zara made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of lying or trying to escape, she decided to tell the truth. I'm Commander Zara Velnoth of the Zephyrian Strategic Command, she said quietly. I've been leading military operations against human settlements for 3 years. Jake's eyes widened in shock. He took a step back, his hand moving toward his communication device to call security. Wait, Zara said quickly. Please, just listen to me for 1 minute. You're a high-ranking enemy commander. I should arrest you right now. Yes, you should. But if you do that, what happens to Kira? She loses both her mother and her guardian in 1 day. Jake stopped reaching for his communicator. The mention of Kira made him pause and think instead of just reacting. Besides, Zara continued, if I wanted to harm you or this station, don't you think I would have done it already? I've had plenty of opportunities. Then why are you telling me this? Why not just take Kira and disappear? Zara took a deep breath. Because I have an idea. Something that could help both our people. But I need your help to make it work. Jake stared at her suspiciously. What kind of idea? What if this situation, you saving Kira, me finding her here, all of us getting along, despite being supposed enemies, what if this could be the beginning of something bigger? I don't understand. Zara moved closer, speaking more quietly even though they were alone. This war is destroying both our species. Families are being torn apart, resources are being wasted, and for what? Pride? Old grudges? You think we should just stop fighting? It's not that simple. No, it's not simple, but it's not impossible either. You and I are proof that humans and Zephyrians can work together, can care about each other. Jake was quiet for a moment, processing what she was suggesting. You want to try to arrange some kind of peace talks? Not just peace talks. Those have been tried before and failed. I'm talking about something different. A grassroots movement that starts with individual soldiers like us. That's incredibly dangerous. If either of our militaries found out we were collaborating, they would probably execute us both, Zara finished. I know the risks, but I also know that this war is wrong, and someone has to be brave enough to try to stop it. Jake walked away from the window and sat down on a nearby bench. This was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. This morning he thought he was dealing with a refugee mother. Now he was talking to an enemy commander about ending a 3-year war. Why me? He asked. You could probably find other humans to work with. Why trust someone you just met? Because you saved my daughter when you didn't have to. Because you've been caring for her like she was your own child. Because when I look at you, I don't see an enemy. I see someone who believes in doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. Zara sat down beside him on the bench. And because Kira loves you. Children have good instincts about people. If she trusts you, then so do I. What exactly are you proposing? Small steps at first. You and I both have influence in our respective militaries. We start by encouraging our units to show mercy when possible. We look for opportunities to help refugees from both sides. We gather other soldiers who are tired of fighting and want something better. And then, eventually, we present our leaders with proof that cooperation is possible. We show them that their soldiers are already working together successfully. We make it harder for them to justify continuing the war. Jake rubbed his forehead, feeling overwhelmed. This is insane. Even if it worked, it would take years, decades, Maybe. Every journey starts with a single step. And besides, what's the alternative? We keep fighting until one side destroys the other completely? Until children like Kira grow up in a universe where hate is the only thing that matters? They sat in silence for several minutes, both thinking about the implications of what Zara was suggesting. Finally, Jake spoke up. If we did this, and I'm not saying we will, how would it work? We can't exactly send messages to each other through normal channels. There are ways, underground networks that help separated families find each other, neutral traders who work with both sides. The same people who helped me get fake diplomatic papers to come here. And Kira. What role would she play in all this? Zara smiled sadly. She would be our inspiration, a reminder of why we're doing this. She's proof that love can exist between our species, that children don't have to inherit their parents' hatred. But we'd be putting her in danger. If extremists on either side found out about our connection to her, she's already in danger. Every child in this war is in danger. At least this way, we'd be working to create a future where she could be safe. Jake stood up and walked back to the window. Outside, he could see ships coming and going from the station, human vessels and alien transports, all carefully avoiding each other as if the other species didn't exist. I need time to think about this, he said finally. Of course, this isn't a decision to make lightly. How long before you have to leave with Kira? I have diplomatic cover for another week. After that, people will start asking questions about why I'm still here, Jake nodded. 1 week then. I'll give you an answer before you have to leave. As they prepared to part ways, Zara touched Jake's arm gently. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that meeting you has changed my perspective on this war. You've shown me that humans are capable of great kindness. That alone makes this worth it. Meeting Kira changed my perspective too. And now meeting you, I don't know what to think anymore. They walked back toward the refugee section together, both lost in thought about the impossible proposition that could change the course of history, or get them both killed trying. Little did they know that their conversation had been overheard by someone who would soon make their decision much more urgent than either of them expected. 6 months had passed since that fateful conversation on the observation deck. Jake stared at the official document in his hands, still hardly believing what he was reading. Transfer orders, Sergeant Jake Rodriguez, assignment to Diplomatic Corps, Interspecies Relations Division. A year ago, he had been a regular combat soldier fighting against Zephyrian forces. Now he was being asked to help build bridges between two species that had been at war for 3 years. Congratulations, Sergeant, said Colonel Thompson as he entered Jake's new office. Your work with refugee integration has been impressive. The brass thinks you have what it takes for this new position. Thank you, sir. I'm honored by the opportunity. What the colonel didn't know was that Jake's success with refugees came from his secret correspondence with Zara. Over the past months, they had been carefully sharing information through underground networks, helping each other identify ways to reduce tensions in their respective sectors. It had started small. Jake would suggest to his commanding officers that showing mercy to captured Zephyrian civilians might yield better intelligence than harsh treatment. Zara would recommend to her superiors that avoiding attacks on human medical facilities could improve their public image. Slowly, both of them began to gain reputations as thoughtful strategists who achieved results through unconventional methods. There's someone I want you to meet, Colonel Thompson continued. We've established contact with a Zephyrian military advisor who's been advocating for peaceful solutions on their side. Apparently, she's requested to work specifically with you. Jake's heart skipped a beat. Could it be Zara? Her name is Commander Felnuth. Do you know her? We've encountered each other before, Jake said carefully. During refugee operations. The next day, Jake found himself in a secure conference room waiting for the first official meeting between human and Zephyrian representatives in over a year. When the door opened and Zara walked in, followed by 2 human diplomats and a Zephyrian translator, Jake had to work hard to keep his expression neutral. Sergeant Rodriguez, Zara said formally, extending her hand in the human greeting she had learned. It's good to see you again, Commander Velnoth, Jake replied, shaking her hand. I look forward to working with you. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Here they were, former enemies who had secretly been collaborating for months, now being asked by their governments to do exactly what they had already been doing. The meeting went well. Zara presented a proposal for joint refugee assistance programs, while Jake outlined ways that both militaries could reduce civilian casualties. Their obvious chemistry and shared understanding impressed everyone in the room. After the formal meeting ended, Jake and Zara were given permission to continue planning, in a smaller working group. Finally alone, they could speak freely. I can't believe this is actually happening, Jake said with a smile. 6 months ago, we were planning secret meetings. Now our governments are paying us to work together. It's beyond what I ever hoped. Zara agreed. But we still have a long way to go. There are people on both sides who don't want peace. Speaking of which, how is Kira handling all this? Zara's face lit up. She's doing wonderfully. She's been living with me on Alteria Prime, but she asks about you constantly. She's learning so much in the integrated school program we started. Integrated school? One of our first successful projects. We have human and Zephyrian children learning together through video connections between our worlds. Kira is one of the star students. She helps translate and teaches other children that friendship is possible between our species. Jake felt a warm glow in his chest. Even though he missed Kira terribly, knowing she was happy and helping other children made the separation easier to bear. She wants to see you, Zara continued. Would that be possible? I know the regulations are complicated, but actually it might be easier than you think. My new position includes travel to neutral zones for diplomatic meetings. I could arrange to meet you both at a space station. Over the following weeks, Jake and Zara worked tirelessly to develop programs that would bring their species closer, together. They created joint rescue missions for natural disasters, established communication channels between military units, and designed cultural exchange programs. Their biggest breakthrough came when they proposed a radical idea: joint military. Exercises focused on peacekeeping rather than combat. Instead of training to fight each other, soldiers from both sides would train together to protect civilian populations and respond to emergencies. This is unprecedented, said General Martinez during a high-level briefing. You're asking us to trust our former enemies with sensitive military information. With respect, sir, Jake replied. We're asking you to trust people who could become our strongest allies. Commander Velnoth has already provided intelligence that helped us save 3 human colonies from asteroid impacts. It was true. Zara had convinced her superiors to share early warning data about space hazards, resulting in successful evacuations that saved thousands of human lives. The first joint training exercise took place on a neutral asteroid mining station. Jake watched nervously as human and Zephyrian soldiers worked together for the first time. There was tension at first. Decades of propaganda and hatred don't disappear overnight. But gradually, as the soldiers worked side by side to complete rescue simulations and disaster response drills, something beautiful happened. They began to see each other as individuals rather than enemies. Look at that, Zara said, pointing to a group of soldiers sharing rations during a break. A young human Marine was teaching a Zephyrian soldier how to use a human communication device, while the Zephyrian showed him how to read atmospheric data using Zephyrian technology. Kira would love this, Jake said with a smile. She's part of the reason this is working. Both our governments have been using her story as an example of what's possible. The little girl saved by an enemy soldier who became a bridge between worlds. The success of the joint exercises led to bigger changes. Ceasefire agreements were signed in 3 major conflict zones. Trade negotiations began between planets that had been at war for years. Most importantly, public opinion on both sides started to shift. News programs that had once shown only battle footage now featured stories of cooperation and friendship. Children who had grown up fearing the other species began to see them as potential friends and teachers. We're being called to Earth for a special ceremony, Jake told Zara during one of their regular planning meetings. Both our governments, Want to recognize our work. What kind of ceremony? They're signing the first official peace treaty between our species, and they want us there as witnesses. 2 weeks later, Jake stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of Earth's global headquarters, wearing his dress uniform and feeling more nervous than he had during any battle. Representatives from dozens of human worlds filled one side of the hall, while Zephyrian delegates occupied the other side. At the front of the room, the leaders of both civilizations prepared to sign a document that would end 3 years of devastating war. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored Zephyrian delegates," announced the human Secretary General, "this historic peace accord is possible because individuals on both sides chose courage over fear, cooperation over conflict." Jake looked across the room and saw Zara in her formal military dress. She had been promoted to general for her work in establishing peaceful relations. Their eyes met, and they shared a smile that said everything about how far they had come. "We want to especially recognize 2 people whose unlikely partnership became the foundation for lasting peace," the Secretary General continued. "Sergeant Jake Rodriguez and General Zara Velnoth, please come forward." As they walked to the front of the room together, Jake felt overwhelmed by the moment. A year ago, they had been enemies who met by chance. Now they were being honored as architects of peace between 2 civilizations. "Your work has shown the galaxy that former enemies can become partners, that understanding can overcome hatred, and that the love of a child can inspire adults to build a better world," the Zephyrian Prime Minister said. After the ceremony, Jake and Zara found themselves in a quiet garden outside the assembly hall. The weight of what they had accomplished was just beginning to sink in. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't saved Kira that day?" Zara asked. "Sometimes. But I think we would have found each other eventually. People like us, who believe in doing the right thing, we tend to find ways to work together. Maybe. But I'm glad it happened the way it did. Kira gave us a reason to trust each other when trust seemed impossible." As if summoned by their conversation, a familiar voice called out behind them. "Jake! Mama!" They turned to see Kira running toward them across the garden. She had grown taller in the months since Jake had last seen her, but her smile was exactly the same. Jake dropped to one knee and caught her in a huge hug. "Hey there, kiddo. I've missed you so much." "I missed you too. Mama says you've been working together to stop the fighting. Is it true that humans and Zephyrians are going to be friends now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Zara said, joining their group hug. "Thanks partly to you. Your story helped people understand that we don't have to be enemies. Does this mean we can all live together now? Like a real family?" Jake and Zara looked at